I think we've been going to present on immigration matters for your members for well over a decade. I've seen many PhDs from the beginning to the end. So that's how long we've been presenting to you guys. And normally we do go to the university, but this year we're going to present via webinar. So it's great to be back here. All right. So let me share my screen here. Every time I come here and meet with you guys, there is always something that's different. But this year, there has been so many changes, especially because of the border restrictions, because of the pandemic, that there are a lot to talk about with you guys. Now, we're going to talk about permanent residence, but before I talk about permanent residence, it's very important for me to talk about some of the things that you need to know while you are on your study permits and on work permits. One of the most important things that I always go through with you guys is this concept of implied status. So let me kind of give you an example of what implied status is. Let's say my study permit expires on March 31st of this year. And, I'm not finished my studies yet. My studies won't finish until, let's say, end of April. Okay. So if I apply to extend my study permit before it expires, the IRCC website says 30 days. That is a recommendation. That's not the law. The law is as long as you file before it expires. So let's say I just file on March 30th. Okay, I will, and it probably might take, let's say, 2 weeks for it to be approved. It might take a lot longer than that, but let's just say for our purposes, it takes 2 weeks to approve. Well, even if my study permit expires on March 31st, if I apply to extend it before then, I have what is called implied status, and I can continue to study until a decision is made. Okay, let's say a decision is made on April 15th, then I can continue to study until then, and hopefully my new study permit will be issued by that time. That is called implied status. Okay, now what happens if I forgot to extend my study permit? And on April 1st is April Fool's Day. April 1st, I play a fool on myself, right? I look at my study permit, oh shoot, it expired. What happens then? Well, first of all, I have lost my status. I don't have implied status. So if I had applied just a few hours earlier, even on March 31st, I could have continued to study. But if I apply on April 1st and my study permit had expired yesterday, then I no longer have status and I can't study, right? So it could be that I might lose the entire semester because I forgot to extend my study permit in time. First thing you want to do when you go home, or you are home probably, okay, check your study permit and make sure that that date, that expiry date, is marked on your calendar 3 times. Now, what I could do if I forgot is I can file a restoration of status, okay? Until I get the study permit, I won't be able to study, but I don't necessarily have to leave until a decision is made on my restoration of status. Normally, the restoration deadline is 90 days from the time that you've lost your status. However, there is a special COVID policy for restoration, and the government is allowing those who have lost their status after January 30th to apply by August 31st. So they have extended that deadline. Okay. If you lost it afterwards, then it's, it's just 90 days essentially. Okay. Now, the third concept that I want to talk to you guys about is the difference between high-skilled and low-skilled work experience. The government of Canada has put into place a classification system for occupations that they called the National Occupation Classification Code, the NOC codes. And there are 5 different categories. O, A, and B are high skilled, and C and D are low skilled. When we talk about permanent residence, you will see how important it is that you know that what you do as work in Canada or even work outside of Canada is defined as either high skilled or low skilled, because for the most part, it's high skilled work that will allow you to get permanent residence, and low skilled work, but for some very exceptional circumstances, won't really help you. So what's high skilled and what's low skilled? Let's play a little game, okay? I'm going to say some occupations and see if you can guess if it's high skilled or low skilled. Let's take an office situation. A receptionist, that's low skilled. A secretary, that's high skilled. A data entry clerk, that's low skilled. A accounting clerk, that's low skilled. A bookkeeper, that's high skilled. Medical assistant, that's high skilled. A dental assistant, that's low skilled. So the point I'm trying to get when I play this game with you guys is that sometimes, well, oftentimes, it's not altogether clear whether something is high skilled or something is low skilled. But it is very important for yourself to check the NOC codes and to make sure that you can find the occupation that is most close to what you do and make sure that that is a high skilled category. All right, so let's talk about some special rules that have been happening during the pandemic, okay? So first of all, if your classes are part-time or on hold because of the COVID, you can still qualify for the postgrad work permit. So, you know, sometimes because of the pandemic, the government has given some leeway to this whole point of a postgrad work permit, which requires everyone to work to study full time in order to get a postgrad work permit. If your classes were canceled because of COVID, you may be able to get postgrad work permit despite the fact that you were studying part time. But make sure you keep evidence of this. If you are applying for your study permit or work permit inside Canada, you're currently exempt from the biometrics requirements, okay? We've talked about the restoration of status. If you are currently in Canada and you have been out of status since January 31st, you have until August 31st to file your restoration of status. Hopefully that's not the case for yourself, because even though you can file it, until you get the final approval, you actually don't have status and you are not allowed to study legally in Canada at that time. All right, so let's talk about studying and working on your study permit. The first thing that you have to be aware of is you lose your status irrespective of when your study permit is valid until. Even if you have a valid study permit, you will lose your student status if you do not actively pursue studies, and you'll lose it within 90 days, okay? So if you are on a, there's 2 exceptions. If you're on your scheduled break, and these are breaks that are on the academic calendar, for example, summer breaks or holidays, etc., that's fine. You can, that doesn't count. Okay. Or if you get a special authorized leave from the school, and the authorized leave from the school you have to get permission from the school, and it's only up to 150 days. So let's say, for example, some people come to me and say, Elizabeth, you know what? This semester, I'm having some family issues, and I'm not able to, you know, like go to school for this semester, or I can't really afford it this semester. Why don't I just do part-time? And I say, no, 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 don't do part-time, because if you do part-time, you probably won't be eligible for your post-grad work at the end. You might as well just go to the school and take the entire semester off and ask them for permission to do so. And then you have authorized leave. And then afterwards come back and you can still get the post-grad work permit at the end. Okay. Now, one thing you have to know, that when you have authorized leave, you cannot work at all, full-time or part-time at all. And that goes to my next point. So when can you work? Okay. You can only work, first of all, when you are a full-time student. That's why authorized leave, you're not allowed to work at all, because you're not enrolled as a full-time student. You can work on your study scheduled breaks, because you're still registered as a full-time student there, but not on authorized leave. The only exception to you being a full-time student is in the last semester. IRCC recognizes that sometimes there might be, one or two classes that you weren't able to fit in within the regular schedule, and you might have to go part-time. If in that case, then they do allow you to go part-time, and you can work full-time in the last semester. When you finish your studies, and this is confusing for a lot of students, you think that once you finished your studies, your study permit is still valid, right? And so you can start working as a scheduled break. IRCC actually says that's not a scheduled break. As soon as you've completed your studies, they say you are not a full-time student. So that's a first indication as to when the school tells you. Let's say you receive something by email, or it's on your portal. Whenever that's the first indication, that's when you have to stop working. Okay. The only exception to that rule is if you have already been accepted to another program afterwards, and there's a one semester, 150 days in between. So let's say I finished my master's, and then I'm going to go and do my PhD. I finished my master's in April, I'm going to do my PhD in September. If you've already been accepted to your PhD in September, then in between the April and September, that semester, you can actually work full-time. And that is if it's under 150 days, okay? During COVID, if your classes are canceled because of COVID, you can work, but it's only part-time. All right, let's talk about the post-grad work permit. Oftentimes students come to me and they say, hey, Elizabeth, when should I apply for my post-grad work permit? I say, hold on. That is not the first question you should be asking. The first question you should be asking yourself is, should I apply for the post-grad work permit? You see, the post-grad work permit is a golden ticket. And we lucky ones only get one golden ticket in our life. And you will, for the most part, only get one time to apply for post-grad work permit. The reason why I say for the most part is because the government, because of COVID, had a special exemption for those people. You have to apply before July 27th, and your work permit has to be expiring within 4 months. They can extend their work permit for 18 months, okay? But this is a very, very special exemption. Likely it won't be there when you guys finish your postgraduate work permits, okay? So don't count on this. For the most part, postgrad work permits is only issued once in a person's lifetime. And they coincide between, like with, if it's under 2 years, it's, how long your program was at. So if it's a 1-year program, you get a 1-year work permit. If it's over 2 years, then you get a 3-year work permit. Now, when we talk about permanent residence, you'll see that oftentimes work experience in Canada will be very important if you wanted to apply for permanent residence. And it could very well be that a 1-year work permit may not be enough for a person to get the job and have the work experience before it ends. Okay. So sometimes if someone comes to me and says, I have a 1-year work permit, I look at their circumstances and I say, ugh, that might not be enough for you to get permanent residence. I might recommend them to do one more 1-year program. So if you've done a 1-year program and you've done another 1-year program, you complete the second 1-year program within 2 years of the first 1-year program, then you can also get a 3-year work permit at the end. Okay, so let's say that you say, okay, you know what, this is good. My plan is I can now apply for the postgrad work permit. Then we take a look at your circumstances. The postgrad work permit normally is one of the easiest work permits to get, but IRCC has become very picky with regard to the part-time studies, okay? So right now, other than the last semester, which we've talked about, the government is requiring, in order for someone to qualify for postgrad work permit, that all of the studies, all of the semesters are full-time. Do they have any exceptions to this rule? Sometimes, but it's at the discretion of the officer. There are 2 exceptions that are the rule that they have to give exceptions for. That's scheduled breaks. That's authorized leave. So authorized leave is when you've received that 150 days leave from the school, and that's fine. And the final semester. Also, they have tweeted that canceled classes during COVID, that you will be okay with that as well. Other reasons, it depends on what the reasons are and if you can make a case for it. It will also depend on what the officer wants to do as well. So if there are circumstances where you went down to being a part-time student, or even if it kind of looks like you might be a part-time student, it's very important that you make sure that the evidence shows that A, if you didn't go part-time, you were not part-time, and B, also to provide proper reasons. We do a lot of these kind of applications for students where we try to convince the officer that someone deserves to get a postgrad work permit despite the part-time situation. Now, let's talk about when should you apply for your postgrad work permit. The rule that I like you guys to keep in mind is 90 days from the time when your program ends, or if your study permit expires, whichever comes first, okay? Now, some of you might say, hey, Elizabeth, I saw on the IRCC website that it's 180 days. So why do you say 90 days, okay? The reason why I say 90 days is it goes back to the rule that I explained a couple of slides ago as to when you lose your student status. You lose your student status when you stop studying for 90 days. And one of the requirements of the postgrad work permit is that a person has student status. That's why if you just say, oh, okay, I'm gonna apply, let's say 170 days, and that's all you do is apply for study permit, your application will likely be rejected. You would have to normally file a restoration of status and then apply for your postgrad work permit. Okay, so the rule that I would like you guys to keep in mind is apply within 90 days. And if you do that, the other benefit is that you can start working as soon as you apply. You don't have to wait for the work permit to be issued in order for you to work full time. Remember, I had said you have to stop working when you finish studying. Well, if you have a job, you need to start working right away. If you apply for the postgrad work permit while you still have a valid study permit and it's within 90 days of you completing your program, then while you're waiting for your work permit, you can start working right away. The other thing that you have to know, and a lot of people, they say, well, my friend did this. My friend just went to the border and got the work permit so fast. Why should I just go and apply online? First of all, don't listen to your friends when it comes to such an important matter such as your immigration status. Okay, this is probably your immigration status, your applications for permanent residence, your applications to extend your status while you're trying to get your points for permanent residence. This is going to be some of the most important things you do. And you cannot rely on rumor or other friends who are not lawyers, who understand what the law is as it pertains to you, because everybody's circumstances are different and the laws change very, very fast. So in this circumstance, for example, your friend before COVID, yeah, if they went to the border, yeah, many people can get the work permit. But during COVID times, they are not going to allow you to go to the border. If they go to the border, they're turning you back. Okay, so don't go to the border to apply for your work permit at this period of time. All right. Let's talk about permanent residence. So the first one I wanted to talk to you guys about is probably the most well-known program, and that's the Express Entry. How it works is, first you have to create an online profile. You get to create an online profile if you qualify under one of three categories: skilled worker class, Canadian experience class, or skilled trades class. Now, once you create a profile, it does not mean that you applied. Okay, a lot of people think, oh, I created a profile, I applied for permanent residence. No, you have not yet applied. What you have done is declared your candidacy and you put yourself into the Express Entry pool. Once you put yourself in the Express Entry pool, you will be given a number of points generated by the computer system depending on the information that you entered into the pool. And so this is the CRS points. You also, if you have provincial nomination in a program that is related to Express Entry, so not all provincial nomination, just the Express Entry linked provincial nominations, you can also get extra points for that. Okay, now every few weeks, okay, normally it's 2 weeks they have a draw, but these days it's pretty sporadic. Okay, but normally it's 2 weeks on the second Wednesday. They have a draw, and the government will announce both a number and a category these days. Okay, sometimes it's like everybody. Before COVID, usually 90% was everybody. Now they announce a number and a category. And if you belong to the category that they have announced, one of these three categories, and your score is above the score that they have announced, then you will get the invitation to apply. It is only after you get the invitation to apply can you apply for your permanent residence. All right, so let's first talk about the three categories to get into the pool. The first one is something that many of you already qualify for. The work experience required for this is 1 year of high-skilled, continuous work experience in one occupation that is at least 30 hours a week, okay? And it's for 1 year. So you could do, let's say, 15 hours a week for 2 years, okay? But they have to be continuous in one occupation. It has to be high skilled. So notice that in this case, I did not talk about Canadian experience. I have many people who have never come to Canada and who qualify under this category. I have also not talked about work experience that you gain after you graduate. I have many PhD master's students who do TARA work that could qualify under this category. Okay. So this is, other than the work experience, you have to get your language tests. They're looking at a minimum of 6 in reading, writing, and speaking, and listening in IELTS, or a 7 in CELPIP, okay, in each category. But that's just to get into the pool. That's not to get out. Then they're going to take a look at all of your circumstances, and you have to meet a certain score of 67 for the federal skilled worker class. Okay, this is just to get into the pool. It's not to get out. So it has nothing to do with the CRS score. It's a certain points, another point system that's related only for the federal skilled worker class. You also have to have minimum savings. For one person, a single person, you're looking at just under 13,000 Canadian. If you have more accompanying family members, you're looking at a few thousand more per family member. Okay, so that's the minimum basis for being able to enter the pool under this category. The second category has received a lot of attention in the past few weeks. It's called the Canadian Experience class. And the reason why this category has received a lot of attention is because a few weeks ago, the government literally invited everybody who qualified under this class to apply. This is unprecedented, okay? But even, in the past while during COVID, most of the draws have been just to invite people under the Canadian Experience class or people who have provincial nominations. So, a lot of people, this is probably because, and they've said that because right now they're not really allowing people outside of Canada to land and get their permanent residence, they wanted to concentrate on people who are working in Canada, okay? So in order to qualify under this category, the work experience has to be at least 1 year in the last 3 years of high skilled, full-time, at least 30 hours a week. So in total, 1,560 hours. So I said high skilled, that is employed work. You can't be self-employed. And it has to be when you are not a full-time student. So this is work experience that either you would get after you finish your program, or if you have a spouse and they have a spousal work permit, they could also get this work experience as well. It has to be high skilled, okay? What's high skilled? NOC O, A, and B. It does not have to be continuous. It does not have to be in the same occupation. It has to be in Canada, and you have to be employed. So you can't be self-employed. You can't own the majority of or significant shares of the company. Also, you shouldn't be a contractor, okay? You have to, normally what they're looking for is a T4 tax remittance slip, okay? The third one I don't go into too much with you guys is for people who are in the skilled trades and the construction trades for the most part. Okay, so let's just say you guys got into the pool, all right? The last draw was 441. Okay, and so if 441, who's going to get out? Well, you say, well, Trupti, obviously. Trupti is going to get out and get an invitation to apply. Well, the thing is, though, I hadn't actually said which category was invited. So in the last category, so it's only yesterday, it was only Canadian experience class people. So I don't know if Trupti qualified under Canadian experience class. If she did, yes, for sure she would get an invitation to apply. If not, she would actually stay in the pool. And people often ask me, so Elizabeth, how do I know what the scores are going to be? My answer is, well, none of us really know, right? And even the government doesn't really know, because they're not necessarily deciding what number to go by. They are deciding how many people they want to select. And so what they're doing is they want to get the top part of whichever category they want to invite, of how many people normally that they want to invite. Are they going to do another draw for Canadian experience class for everyone? Who knows? I don't know. But what I might predict is that the scores for Canadian experience class may be lower, because a lot of people have already been invited to apply. And so therefore, if they continue to do with Canadian experience class, there's not going to be as many people who are in the pool, and therefore the points might go lower. All right, so how do you get your points for express entry? The first one of the most important thing is age. Once you get to your 30th birthday, it's no longer a happy birthday, okay? Because every year that you get older in your 30s, it goes down by 5 or 6 points. In your 40s, it's a fast slide down, 10, 11 points. By the time you get to your 45th birthday, the good news is that it doesn't go down anymore. The bad news is that you have a big fat zero on your age points. Now, if you compare somebody who is in their 20s who has 100 or 110 points, that's a very, very big difference, okay? Education. If you guys are in the grad programs, you are great. People who have 2 degrees, especially master's, PhD even better, your points for education will be one of the highest ones. Language is very, very important. If you do not have, work experience in Canada, often what we're looking for is language points of 7s in reading, writing, and speaking, and an 8 in listening for IELTS, or a 9 in every category for CELPIP. The reason why I say this is because your points will significantly jump if all of your language points meet that level. Relevant Canadian work experience, that is the work experience I described with regard to the Canadian experience class. The only difference is that this one, we can count your work experience within the last 10 years. Foreign work experience is also important. It has to be high-skilled work experience outside of Canada, and it has to be within the last 10 years. Spouse's education, language, Canadian work experience can also count a few points here and there. It's not as important as the principal applicants. By the way, the definition of spouse in Canada is not only for those people who are married, it's also for people who have common law partners. And the definition of common law for immigration purposes is if you have lived with your partner for at least 1 year in a conjugal relationship. So, couple things. One, oftentimes if we have someone who are in a common law or spousal relationship, it's great to have both of them apply at the same time, because oftentimes one person might have higher points. It might just be enough and better than the other person. And secondly, as long as you have, even if you have a common law spouse, you have to declare that person. And whether or not they accompany you or not, they have to do medicals and police certificates. So it's very important for someone not to misrepresent. If you misrepresent, you could be barred from Canada for 5 years, and you could have your status stripped away afterwards. Okay, so when you apply for your work permit, when you apply for permanent residence, if you have a spouse, it doesn't matter whether or not you love them, or hopefully you love them. But even if you don't love them, you lived with them, you are living with them, they are your spouse, and you have to declare them. All right. Provincial nominee programs. Provincial nominee programs, and we're going to talk about it in the next slide. They will give you 600 points. Okay, with 600 points, it doesn't matter what it is, you're going to be invited to apply. But it's not every provincial nominee program that will allow you to apply. It has to be express entry linked. Previous study in Canada, if you received your master's or PhD, you get 30 extra points, which is really good. You have to have finished your program in order to get those points. And arranged employment points. So a lot of people say, hey, I have a job offer, therefore I have arranged employment. That's not necessarily the case. Arranged employment requires somebody to have a employer-specific work permit or LMIA in order to be able to claim points. Also, so sometimes you can do postdoc work permit. You can get a work permit based on that. But you also have to show that if it's a postdoc work permit, you have to work in there for at least a year, and you have to show that you have a job offer for 1.5 to 2 years afterwards. Okay. If you have siblings who are Canadians or permanent residents in Canada, you get 15 points. And fluency in French. So if you're a Francophone, there are a lot of different options for you. And one of the things is you can get a lot of points for express entry if you do the TEF, and you can get the certain level in French. Trade certification, that's for the construction trades. Okay, so you guys are, some of you, if you take a look at this, you're feeling good. You're like, wow, you know what? I can do this. Other people, you're looking at this, you're all depressed because you're like, oh man, my English may not be that high. I may be older. All right. Now let's talk about some other things that you can do to get permanent residence. Okay. The first thing that I want to talk to you guys about is, remember, I keep talking about PNP, express entry link streams. What is PNP, first of all? So here's how PNPs work. See, immigration is federal jurisdiction. The federal government is responsible for immigration. But the federal government has also made an agreement with every province to allow each province to select people that they want to get permanent residence at as well. Those are called the provincial nominee programs. In Ontario, our provincial nominee program is called the OINP, Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program. OINP has different kinds of programs. The first kind of program is express entry linked. So if you get a nomination under this program, you can go and get 600 points for your express entry. Okay, so here's how it works. First of all, you have to be in the express entry pool to receive an expression of interest. You can't just go directly and apply to get 600 points for Ontario. They have to see you in the pool and like you enough to send you an expression of interest. It's kind of like, that website, that dating site, Bumble? I've never been on that before, but what I've heard is that basically, if you are a guy and you're on Bumble, you can't directly contact the women on Bumble by yourself. You have to be in that website, and then the women can contact you if they're interested in you, and then you guys can start communicating. So that is kind of like this. Let's say you're the guy and OIMP is the woman, okay? You can't just go and apply to OIMP directly. You have to be in the pool. OIMP sees you, they like you, they send you an expression of interest and say, hey, come and apply with us. That's only when you can go and apply with them. So who are they going to like? There are three main categories. The first category is the most unknown, okay? This is one where they can do whatever they like, they said. They can invite anyone they like. And who do they like? Well, first of all, they've identified the tech draw. So they've identified a few occupations in the tech industry that they say they will have draws on a regular basis. It's not everybody who has that background who they will invite. They are looking for people who also have a certain level of points normally for express entry that will, maybe it's a little bit lower than the normal draw, that they will invite to apply with them. There are other times they have identified other occupations as well at also a certain level that they will invite to apply with them. In order to qualify for this, you have to have a bachelor's degree or higher. The second one is for skilled trades. Those who are in the construction trades who have worked for at least 1 year in Ontario, they may be invited. And the third one is for French speakers. You lucky francophones, okay? If you have a certain level in French and your points are a little bit lower for express entry, then OIMP could invite you to apply with them and get the 600 points that you need in order to go through express entry. All right, enough about express entry, okay? Let's move away from that. The next few things that I'm going to talk to you guys about has nothing to do with express entry. The first one is the master's and PhD streams. So if you graduate from a master's or PhD in Ontario, you guys can qualify under this category. You don't have to have a job offer, okay? You have to have some minimum savings, and if you're master students, you have to pass CLB of 7, which is 6 in IELTS, and CELPIP is 7. Easy, right? Fantastic. So why don't you apply for that? Well, a couple of things. A, the processing time for this category is longer, can be longer than express entry. Processing time for this category, you're looking at anywhere from 1.5 years to 2 years on average, okay? Second thing is, so many people have been applying for this that because the Ontario government, they have a smaller quota as to how many people they select. They have been opening and closing this category very, very fast. So in the past few years, when they've opened the program, they've only opened it for a few minutes before they close it. And even if you're on there during the few minutes, you have to have extremely high internet speed to even get a spot. So what the government is going to do, they've announced it, is that they're going to layer this with an EOI system. They're going to have something where people who want to apply under this category, you first put your profile in, kind of like express entry, okay? And then they will have a draw and invite people who qualify under that to apply. It's not in place yet. We're expecting it to be in place soon, okay? By the way, the laws in immigration change so much and so fast that the only way that we're going to be able to tell you about the new laws that are coming out is to put you guys in our newsletter. So I've taken the liberty of putting you guys who've registered in our newsletter. And if you're watching this on YouTube and you hadn't registered, feel free to go on our website and register for the newsletter. And we will be sending you news, like when the new EOI system opens, we'll let you know as well, okay? But some of this system, people are like, oh man, I just got away from express entry. Now you're saying there's another express entry that qualified. This one might be a little bit different. So the criteria that they haven't finalized it yet, but it looks like they're not, for example, taking into account age. That might not be much of a factor. Language will be something that they said they're looking at. We don't know how much they're going to emphasize that. There might be other things that you can have that will put you to be more. If you have a job offer, for example, if you've been working in Ontario, or if you've been working outside of the GTA, that might be something as well. Okay, so that's one of the categories. The other one that I want to talk to you about is also OIMP, and it's an employer-based one. So that first one, the master's and PhD, you don't have to have a job offer. This one you do. And so how it goes is, first, your employer has to qualify. If they're inside the GTA, they have to have a gross income of $1 million, 5 full-time Canadian permanent resident employees, and be in business for 3 years. If they're outside of the GTA, their gross income has to be $500,000. They have to have 3 full-time Canadian or permanent resident employees and be in business for 3 years. The job offer has to be full-time and permanent. Now, if you have an employer who offers you that kind of job, then you could look at qualifying under one of the 3 different categories. The first one is the international student. So when you guys graduate with your master's or PhD, as long as you apply under this program within 2 years of graduation, and the job offer is high skilled and the salary meets entry level wage, then you could qualify for this. If you are not an international student, you haven't graduated, or it's been a while since you've graduated, you need 2 years of work experience in the last 5 years in the occupation, and your salary has to meet median wage. There's also one for in demand, and this is one of the only low skilled categories out there. It's not any low skilled work, it's specific low skilled work. But if they have 9 months of work experience, then they could qualify under this category as well. Now, again, with this category, and I think this is all because the points for express entry have been so high that a lot of people have been going to these kind of categories. Who knows, if the point system is lower, then maybe it might not be as popular. But the government, because the last few years, these categories have been opening and closing very, very fast, the government has also said they will put that EOI system that I talked about for the master's and PhD, that will also be in place for this one as well. All right, one last category that I wanted to go through with you guys, and this is for entrepreneurs who, you don't want to get a job offer because you have an amazing idea, you have an amazing company that you want to start yourself. You could apply for permanent residence under the startup visa. So under this category, up to 5 founders can apply, as long as all of the applicants and the designated organization has at least majority shares in the company. You all pass the English or French level of CLB 5, and each person has an active management role. And then if your company can receive a letter of support from a designated organizations. Normally we're looking at incubators or angel investor groups that the government has put on their list. Normally we're looking at innovative companies, normally beyond the idea stage. You may be able to, if you can get a letter of support there, then we can apply for permanent residence. You can also get a work permit as well if you need to work under this category. So if you are interested in this, do let me know, and I can speak with you about some of the programs, some of the incubators and angel investor groups that we work with. All right, so I've talked a lot about these immigration laws, and I'm sure some of you maybe are having some anxiety or having a headache. Let's talk about some concrete things that you need to do. Okay, the first one, what I would advise you guys to do is plan. You know, like most things, immigration as a complex sort of situation is not something that you can just go into and without knowing how to do it, without knowing what exactly how you need to structure your life. Okay. It's not enough to just think, oh, I need to get some language tests or I need to get a job offer. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Whatever it is, it has to be clear in your mind how to get there. What I normally recommend is people to come to me as early as possible. It doesn't have to be that you qualify before you come to me. I love to see people before you qualify so I can tell you how to get qualified to get permanent residence. Okay? Once you have a plan, you have to set your mind to get there, right? So, for example, if you're you need to get a very high level in English, go and study for your IELTS. Even if English is your first language and only language, a lot of people don't do well on the IELTS just because these tests often test how well you can do the exam. So make sure that that is something that you really take seriously and study. You may need to get more programs, you may or may not. Make sure that before you register for programs or just apply for postgrad work permit, you have your plan ready. Okay? And again, make sure you have enough time on your work permit to get what you need to do to get permanent residence. Third thing is don't stray. Okay? A lot of times people will come to me and say, hey, you know what, my friend, I didn't really work, but I can get my parents' friends or I can get a friend to say I did work with them, right? Or someone has said, yeah, if I pay them $10,000, they're going to get me a job offer. Okay. All of these kind of things equate to misrepresentation, which is a criminal act. And it's also something that if they discover before you get permanent residence, you'll be barred from applying for permanent residence for 5 years, and you will be asked to leave Canada, or not just asked, but you will be told to leave Canada. And even later, let's say say it works, right? You do get your permanent residence, and then they find out afterwards. Oftentimes, there are raids, for example, on these bad consultant sort of organizations, and they rate it and they see notes of clients that they have had from before, and all of these people will lose their permanent residence afterwards. So it's not worth it. You guys are in an excellent situation to get permanent residence. You just need to plan and do it very carefully. Okay? Don't misrepresent. Make sure you stay in status as much as you possibly can, and you should be able to get there. Now, if your application is rejected, you must contact a lawyer right away. Okay? If you apply inside Canada, the notice period is 15 days from the date of the rejection. Okay? If you want to file a notice afterwards, you feel it's unfair, you want to do it afterwards, then you could be barred from doing so because you've missed the deadline. Also, the IRCC is not like Amazon. Okay? We're all so used to, when we do things online or we buy something, we call the call center if something goes wrong, right? And we complain. And then they do something about it and it's all done. Okay? IRCC also has a call center, but they're not like Amazon agents. They don't help you. They may say that they help you, but they also have their own interests. And the information that they give you often is incorrect. And if you follow their advice to your own detriment, they're not going to be held responsible. One of the things that people often tell me is they get a decision that they feel is unfair, is incorrect. They call the call center, and the call center will tell them, why don't you go and write a letter? Write a letter and explain yourself. Okay? Sounds great, I get something wrong with my I get a wrong product from Amazon, I might type them a message, write a letter. Great. This is not Amazon. This is immigration, okay? This is this is very, very complex laws. And most of the time, if you write your own letter, it will be rejected. And then you might say, okay, finally, I should probably go see a lawyer. And if you come and see a lawyer like me, I might say to you, it's too late for me to go and provide proper submissions on a reconsideration, because what you have done is you have already done what is considered a reconsideration application, and IRCC will only consider one reconsideration. Even if you've done it and I have all of my arguments and I know it's correct, if I put in the reconsideration, IRCC will likely say to me, sorry, we're not going to review it. We're not going to look at it because your client has already filed a reconsideration. Okay? So, and then the last thing is make sure that you see a lawyer right away, because time is running by fast. For example, you apply for a postgrad work permit and it's rejected, you have a very limited time to reapply, right? Or your status may have expired. So whatever it is, keep in mind, application is rejected, contact a good lawyer right away. All right, so this is our information. If you guys wanted to have a personal consultation, do let me know that you attended this webinar and we will give you the discounted student rate from U of T, okay? All right, Zia, what questions do we have today?
We've gotten some great questions, Elizabeth, so I'll jump right in. For students who are currently studying outside of Canada, right? So because of the COVID pandemic, they're not in Canada and they're studying. How does that affect their eligibility for the postgrad work permit?
That's a great question. So right now, the government has said that if you are studying outside of the country and eventually you do get your study permit approved, this is really important. So if you study from outside of the country and you don't have your study permit approved, it won't work. But if you eventually get your study permit approved, but your study permit, for example, hasn't been approved now, or you just decide you have it approved, but you don't want to come to Canada, you can study for this year. You can study outside of Canada and still use that time for your to put towards your postgrad work permit.
And what happens, does that change at all if your entire program is done online?
No, it's fine if your entire program is done online. That's absolutely fine.
Perfect. So someone who's here in Canada finishes their program of study, can you go over when they can work, when they can't work, when are they thought to be done their program?
Sure. So let's say I'm doing my exams, okay? Or I'm defending my dissertation. Okay, so during that time, I'm still in school and I can work part-time. When the first indication from the school that you've passed all your exams, you passed your you passed your dissertation, and you completed the program, at that point you are no longer a full-time student. You have to stop working full-time, part-time, anytime. Okay. And if you apply within 90 days and while your study permit is still valid, okay, so whichever comes first, then you can start working, then you can start working full-time at that point.
Perfect. What about if an individual is outside of Canada applying for their postgrad work permit? Do they need to have authorization? Do they need to have a work permit here in order to work remotely for a Canadian company?
So if you are First of all, I don't really know why you would apply for postgrad outside of Canada if you're inside Canada, right? So that's something that individually I speak to you about. But, you know, if you were to work remotely for a company outside of Canada and that company has no Canadian interests in Canada, then that is not considered work in Canada that requires a work permit.
Perfect. Now, when I finish my program of study, if I want to be able to travel, while I'm waiting for the postgrad work permit, what do I need to know, especially right now with COVID?
Especially right now with COVID, in general, my advice to you is if you don't have to travel, do not travel. There are very strict rules about entering Canada that are changing constantly. And especially if you don't have a work permit yet, and you know if your study permit expires, you probably won't even be able to get on the plane to come back. Um, if you must travel because of some certain reason, I would need to meet with you and have a consultation with you to determine if it's possible for you to come back if you need to do that.
Perfect. And is there a maximum number of hours that you can work on that postgrad work permit or even while you're on the implied status?
You can work as much as you possibly can. There's no limit.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about the open spousal work permit for postgrad work permit holders?
Yes. So if you have a spouse and they already hold a work permit because you had a study permit, their work permit is good until it expires. Uh, the only exception is sometimes I have seen these officers put a notation in that it's only valid while while the student's study permit it has study student status. So that there might be a little bit of gray area there, but if it doesn't, then for the most part, your spouse's work permit is valid until it expires. Um, in order for them to extend their work permit, the principal applicant, you need to go and get a high skilled job, and then they can get their work permit extended.
Does that have to be a full-time job?
No, it could be part time. It's best if it's full time, but part time is okay. It just has to be high skilled.
Perfect. Going back to while I'm in my study, so while I'm still doing my program, am I allowed to do an internship if my program specifically does not include co-op requirements?
So
So
you
to elaborate, I want to take an authorized leave to do an internship.
Okay. So if you're going to take an authorized leave, you're not allowed to work at all. Okay. If you are doing, if you have a co op work permit and that internship is part of the requirements of your study, you can use the co op work permit to do that. But if it's not part of the requirements of your study and you just want to do the internship because you've been offered it, then you cannot do that. If you wanted to do an internship and it's part-time and you're going to school as a full-time student, you can certainly do that because you can work off campus. If the internship is on campus, and let's say doing a TARA or even just working on campus and you are a full-time student, you could work there and it could be full-time.
Perfect. For students who want to start their own business, can they do that while they're on their study permit?
You can work part-time while you are a full-time student. You can do whatever you like. So if you wanted to start your business, you could. The only thing is, you know, you should be careful not to do full-time work um, while you're studying because you're only allowed to do 20 hours off campus. So just be careful about that.
And then, so let's say I start my business after I finish my program, so I'm on my postgrad work permit. Can I use that work experience for Canadian Experience class?
You cannot use that because you're self-employed. Anything where you own a significant shares in the business and you have exert certain control in the business, that's considered self-employment work. So even if you've incorporated and you then, give yourself a salary, that's not included. So anything that is self-employed, you cannot get the points for work experience for Canadian for express entry, and you also can't get the points for to qualify you for Canadian experience class. You may be able to, if you get a work permit that is employer specific, like an entrepreneur work permit, you may be able to um, get arranged employment points, which can be up to 200 points if you are an executive manager of your
Perfect.
company. Yeah.
And then for Canadian experience class, the work, if I have a contract that's either part-time or only 6 months in length, does that mean that I can't use that for the Canadian experience class requirement?
No, you can absolutely use that. It doesn't matter if it's part-time or if it's as a contract. So a contractor is not someone who has a contract position. A contractor is someone who is self-employed. For example, if I am going to hire someone to paint my house, they say, like I say, how much is it to paint my house? They say, well, it's going to be $3,000. I say, okay. So I give them $3,000. I don't deduct from the $3,000 EI, CPP, income tax, right? Because they're not my employee. That's what a contractor is. On the other hand, I can hire someone as my assistant, and I can say, I only want you to work for me part-time basis, and I only want you to work for me right now. The contract is only for 1 year. They're still my employee. When I pay their salaries, I deduct income tax, CPP, and EI, and that's okay.
That's a great example. That really does clarify it. You spoke about the streams for international students and foreign workers in OINP and how they're now going to require an expression of interest. Is that creating a profile in Express Entry?
It has nothing to do with Express Entry. Those programs are completely separate. So the EOI system is something that is for non-Express Entry programs that they are going to now put into place.
Perfect. Last, Elizabeth, can you please go over how students can schedule a consultation appointment?
Yes, email us, and and then we'll set it up with you. Very easy. Just email.
And that's at the email address that you have displayed right now.
That's right. And tell us you've been to the webinar so you can get your discount as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Elizabeth.
Thanks so much, Zia. Okay, thanks everyone. Take care.